over the last, I'm going to say 7 or 8 months, we've been getting a lot of questions about SEO marketing, social media management, content marketing, all these different phrases. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to address everyone as a group and talk about some of these things. So there's a lot of cliches and acronyms that you'll see throughout this industry. You've heard them over and over again, like SEO. But I'll try and avoid most of them as well as I can. But the one that always stands clear and that you'll hear all the time is the only unchanging truth about internet marketing is that it's always changing. You can't get away from it. It changes at least 4 times a year at minimum. So if you're not on top of these things, you're falling behind. And in 2014, Google introduced a new algorithm that requires, over 200 different factors in your SEO marketing. I'm not sure if anybody here knows any one of the factors. Does anyone here know other than you, Craig? Anyone at all? Who are you relying on to make sure these things are updated in your company? Is it your IT guy? I hope not. If it's your IT guy, you need to look elsewhere because most IT guys don't really know this information the way they should. So 112 years of changes for Google, metaphorically, or 16 years, equates to a lot of different things. In '99, there was a lot of things called keyword stuffing and back-end things that you could do to sort of game the system. And every change Google has made since then is to make a way that you can't cheat the system, which is good for the users, for every one of us here. So what they've really done is they've made it all about content. What are you putting on your website? Is it powerful? Is it valuable to the users? And if it is, you're on the right track. And for years, content marketers have always said content is king, which is absolutely the truth. Absolutely the truth. How many companies here in the room add content to their website on a weekly basis? Anyone? You got, 7. I know you do, Jen. You can raise your hand. It's been a couple weeks. Okay. Most companies don't even add content more than once a month to their website, and that's not a good thing, especially if you're relying on the internet to help create new relationships and new businesses. Okay. So when you're talking about SEO and search optimization, there's really 2 different types. There's what's called on-site optimization, which is all the code, which is all the technical sides, the tagging, the imagery, how your content's written, those types of things. Then you have got the off-site optimization, which currently is called content marketing. Previous years you heard things like link building, directory listings. That was all content or off-site marketing as well, just a different style. But now, that off-site optimization, the content marketing, is what drives improvement. The on-site optimization, that'll do nothing more than assure that you keep the rankings that you currently have. You can do all the on-site optimization you want or traditional SEO, but you'll never gain any new momentum. The only way you can gain momentum these days is through content marketing. So those of you that are not adding content to your website on a weekly basis, you're probably not seeing any new results or better results. You're probably seeing the same results that you've always seen and wondering why other companies might be overtaking you in some points. So it's important to know that. And when you do this content, it has to meet a lot of criteria. First off, it has to be valuable to the people that are reading it. If it's not valuable in any way, then it may as well not be up there. If I share something on LinkedIn with Doug and it really has no value to him, there's no way he's going to talk about it to his friends or share it or tell people in his networks. And that's really what I want. I want Doug to say, hey, check out Steve's content or his latest blog because it offers a lot of value to you and I think you should read it. So that's how you should really look at every piece of content that you put on your website. No matter what your industry is, it has to provide value. It has to be powerful. It has to be eye-catching. And if it's not, you shouldn't spend the time and resources on creating it. You're better off not doing it at all, to be quite frank. Along with that, you have to think about the methods that you use to create this content and how you distribute it among your audience. Most people use a blog. That seems to be the most common way, but there's a number of different ways. You can create newsletters, articles, press releases, all of these types of things. And it can be valuable for your clients or your potential clients or a way to create new audiences that maybe you haven't seen before. Or like in Vehicles for Change's case, they're trying to break into Detroit, where probably most people don't know who they are. Well, the internet is a great way to do that, especially where there isn't public transportation and people are looking at how can I get cars or how can I donate cars so someone else can use it. It's a great opportunity for them. So with that in mind, the 2 sides of internet marketing, your online or on-page optimization, technical side, your content optimization, your content marketing, the creative side, you really have to think about it from two perspectives now. You have to think about the website design and the SEO, but the content really starts to cross that bridge into the PR management, companies like Rob's over there. So they're the two sides of the same coin. You're trying to generate traction and generate an audience through content that's online. And I can't tell you how important that is. Those of you that have done it successfully know you can see ROIs close to 1,000% if you're doing it correctly. Previous years, when there was a number of different ways to, quote, game or cheat the system, you saw much higher ROIs, but they'd go away very quickly, because as soon as Google made a change to their algorithm, those systems would no longer work. Those cheats would no longer work. And the companies that were doing it correctly from the beginning saw steady and consistent results. And that's what everyone here is looking for, really. So when you're creating that content, and you're working with a good PR company or a good SEO company, and there are very few that actually meld the two together, because most companies and firms haven't seen that correlation yet. But once you meld them together, you can really create a powerful strategy to build your audience. And then it gets shared through social media. Everyone's heard it here. Social media, Facebook. I've heard it time and time again. My company isn't on Facebook. That's not where my audience is. And you're right, for the most part. Your company is not on Facebook because your audience isn't there. But your future audience is. And if you're looking for a long-term investment in your company, you need to start now. Because the people that are on Facebook, which range mostly between the ages of 25 and 40, those are decision makers. And they're currently decision makers and they're future decision makers. So if you're looking for some type of long-term strategy to guarantee success in the future, you need to start now. And if Len Miller was here, he would tell you about exit planning, and he would tell you about selling your company. And he'd say, well, the best way to sell your company is to ensure you've got a very strong client base in the future. And this is another good way to ensure that. So social, believe it or not, is the second most used platform for searches. Google is obviously number one. They represent just under 70% of every search that's done online. Directly under that, believe it or not, is YouTube. And I got to tell you, I don't search YouTube very often unless I'm looking for something really important, because I need to learn how to do something. If I need to learn something, I immediately go to YouTube to search it. Following that, actually, is Twitter. Twitter generates a little over 2.7 billion searches per day. That's a lot. And that's Twitter. Is anyone here on Twitter at all? Everyone's on Twitter. How come you're not on Twitter, Doug?
I was on Twitter, but I got...
tweeted out? Yeah. I gotcha. Facebook, believe it or not, is a little over 500 million on a daily basis, which gets a very large drop from Twitter. And following that is Bing, and then Yahoo, which only represent about 13% of searches. So there's a lot to think about when you're doing these things. So the conclusions about all of this is that most companies here specifically are about relationships, building relationships, keeping relationships, and that is extremely important. I know it. That's why I hired Jack, because I'm horrible at it. Jack, everybody knows Jack, and if you don't, well, then you don't know Jack. After you build those relationships and you want to generate new business, you need marketing, and that reinforces your existing and helps bring in new relationships. And then that marketing builds new audiences, which then in turn build new relationships. And if it's about relationships, believe it or not, you need to be online, and you need to be on social media. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff at all? Yeah, Craig.
On the new study that came out in August regarding performance, website performance is now considered a factor.
Yes, website performance is a big factor. In fact, it's always been a factor. The biggest change in that study is talking about the speed of your website, how quickly it loads, but also the protection. Have you seen a press release on SSL certs and how that's affecting further internet search engine optimization? If your website doesn't have a quick performance time on multiple devices, by the way, not just the desktop, has to do well on mobile devices and also tablet devices, and if it has an SSL cert, which basically it's a security function, your site is going to get better rankings than a competitor that doesn't. Okay. I saw another hand over here. Vasilios.
What do you think about Google Plus?
I think Google likes it when you use Google products, to be quite honest. Google Plus has shown in conjunction with other social medias, has shown improvement as far as search functionality. So if you're on Facebook, Twitter, and let's say you're on Pinterest and LinkedIn, which are non-Google products, you see a certain level of search results. As soon as you enter Google Plus and YouTube into the factor, which are both Google products, you see a slight bump. So to ignore it because you think nobody's using it isn't a wise decision. You should use it more or less just because Google likes it when you use it. Are there any other questions?
Steve, let's hear it.
Thank you.
Randy Sutton. His police career spanned 3 decades when he retired as a field lieutenant with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Transferred to Las Vegas because he was a little bit bored with life as a police officer in Princeton, New Jersey. To this day, he remains recognized as one of the most highly decorated officers in the department's history, with numerous awards for life-saving, exemplary service, as well as valor. He is also one of America's best-known officers, having been featured on popular TV shows like Cops, America's Most Wanted, and films like we talked about before, Casino. He had some nice war stories there. Another movie was Fools Rush In and Miss Congeniality 2 with Sandy Bullock, right? Bullock. And he's also been on many TV shows, cable news as a commentator, and a regular panelist on the television show Fired Up. He is also a critically acclaimed author. He's written 4 books, and his book is soon to be released, entitled The Power of Legacy and What You Leave Behind. He's also written extensively on the topics of ethics, integrity, and leadership for many national magazines. He's the creator of the website, thepoweroflegacy.com. It's a website dedicated to encourage the principles of honor, integrity, compassion, and kindness. Some subjects he speaks about to law enforcement officers as well as business groups like ours across the country. He is also the founder and president of Celebrating Legacy, a company where memories live forever, providing their members with the ability to celebrate lives in the present, honor lives from the past, and share family history for the future. Please welcome, everybody, Randy Sutton.
Thank you very much. When I say that I'm honored to be here, I don't take that lightly. It's really true. You've given me something that you don't get back, and that is your time. So I really thank you for the honor of inviting me. I flew in from Vegas last night, and it's nice to see cool weather. I love it. You know, speaking before groups of leaders, I like to discuss leadership in certain aspects, but we're really going to talk about legacy. And leadership is legacy. Think of the lives that count on you. Think of the people that you affect every single day, especially as CEOs, as leaders in your company. You probably affect more lives than you even imagine. And so, if I'm going to have any impact today, and the last thing I want to do is walk out of here and you don't remember who I am, I have to tell you a lot about my history. You're going to get to know me very well in the next 20, 30 minutes. And some of what I have to tell you is I'm going to share with you. I know this is a lectern for lectures, but we're not going to do that. I don't have the ability to lecture you, but I do have the ability to share with you. And I'm going to take you a little bit on my journey. And so let's go back to a little bit. You know, you heard some of the basics of my past. I loved being a cop. I feel very I'm a lucky guy because I knew what I wanted to do from the time I was a little kid. I wanted to be a policeman. And I have a history of that in my family. My grandfather was a deputy sheriff up in New York, and he was actually shot in the line of duty. And so that always had an impact to me. And I was very fortunate. I became the youngest police officer in the state of New Jersey. I was 19 when I became a cop. And tell me, if you don't look upon some of the decisions that you made when you were 19? And you wonder about them. Well, now I look back on some of the decisions that I made as a 19-year-old cop, and I kind of cringe. I was old enough to go into the academy. I was trained in the New Jersey State Police Academy, but I wasn't old enough to buy my ammunition because you had to be 21 to buy bullets. So I'm about to go into the police academy, the New Jersey State Police Academy, where I must tell you it's very tough to get in. And I had to ask my mother to go buy my bullets for me for the training, a fact that she never let me forget to the time that she passed away. So I was 19 years old, became a cop in Princeton, my hometown, great little town, but it was kind of boring as a Princeton police officer, I must say. And so, but one of the things that happened to me there is a story that is in the book that is coming out in February. It's called The Power of Legacy. And The Power of Legacy is a book where I traveled the country talking to people that have done amazing things with their lives about who their personal heroes were, who it was that affected their lives. I have amazing people like Mr. Frank Shankwitz, who created the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Gary Sinise, who, of course, as an actor, he was Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, but he's given millions and millions of dollars through his foundation to veterans. A woman who lost her entire family in a drunk driving accident, as one person, she changed the entire series of laws for that. People that have seen amazing trauma, felt it, and yet taken that and moved forward to create organizations or do things for others that are beautiful, and that's what the book is about. But the story that I put in this book was about when I was a young cop in Princeton. I was maybe 22, 23. I'd been a cop, and I thought I knew it all already, you know, 3 years. And but the world was very black and white to me. You know, everybody went to jail, everybody got a ticket, strict enforcement, and that's the way I thought that was being a good cop. And so I led the police. I actually made more arrests than every other police officer in my 35-man police department in 1 year. I made more arrests than the rest of the guys. Well, it's not because I was such a great cop, it's because I didn't understand that there was gray in the world. But fortunately, a man entered my life who I had a great deal of respect for. He was my sergeant. And he was a high school graduate, didn't go to any leadership, you know, college or anything like that. But he was one of those people that was a natural leader. You know, he was courageous. I had seen him in action. He listened to me when I spoke. He didn't demean anyone. He was just a natural leader. And one morning, he takes me to breakfast, and we go to a diner in New Jersey, and I'm telling him about my stories of the night. You know, yeah, I arrested this guy, and I did that, and I did that. And he's listening, he's nodding. And he finally says, you know, Randy, you're a good cop. And I was thinking, yeah. He says, you know, you do. You know the laws really well. You're out there working your butt off. You know search and seizure. You do a great job. He says, but let me ask you one question. Do you know the difference between being a good cop and being a great cop? And he had me stumped on that one. And I said, no. And he kind of smiled. He says, it's one word. It's called compassion. And that one word that he gave me, that one statement, changed my life. Changed the way I became a cop. Changed the way, as I grew into leadership roles in the police agency, changed the way that I did business. And as a result, his words to me affected the lives of people that worked for me for years. And that's what his legacy was to me. And that's how important, when you're in a leadership role like that, even one simple interaction can change the life of someone that respects you. So I was a cop there for 10 years. I was a patrol officer for 6, and then a detective, and then I got to say I got a little bored, and then I wasn't all that impressed with the leadership of my department. I decided it was time for a change. So I went out and joined the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. At that time, it was one of the fastest growing police departments and the fastest growing cities. And I had to go through the academy again. This time I was one of the older people in the academy. And you know the old adage of be careful what you wish for? Well, I got it. I was out of the academy 6 months when a 15-year-old tried to kill me. And what had happened was it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was on patrol with my partner, and we spotted a stolen car. We gave a pursuit. The car crashed. Everybody ran, and it was through a housing urban area. And as I came around the corner of a building, there was this kid with a gun standing there. And I instinctively fired my weapon, and there was a wall right here, and the bullet hit by the kid's head, and a piece of stucco just did this, and he thought he was shot. So he dropped the gun, and I got to take him into custody with nothing more than some underwear that needed changing. So that was when I realized you're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Well, I spent the next 24 years as a police officer with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Can I get my water just for a second? And I'd like to tell you a couple of stories from that because it's germane to my interest in legacy. One of the reasons that I always loved being a police officer was because you had the opportunity to affect the lives of other people in positive ways or negative. Most of the time I chose positive. But I had a couple things that truly affected my life. Each of us, as we go through our journey of life, there are milestones along the way. They can be very positive milestones. We have a child, we get married, we get a new job that affects our lives. But not all of the milestones are positive, are they? There's tragedy that goes along the way. And they too are milestones because they are what defines us. Well, I had some great milestones. One was an incident where a little girl was shot in the face, and I happened to come upon the scene less than a minute later and was able to bring her back and save her life. She's now my goddaughter. That's one of the things that you look back and you say, you know, I really did make a difference. But then there are other incidents that took place that changed my life forever. Normally, when I give a talk like this, I get to show, because we have audio-video stuff, I get to show an episode from Cops, which is pretty cool to see. And this is a pretty hairy episode where I take down 3 gang members who are all armed. And I do so without firing any weapons, and they're all dope dealers, so we get some dope off the street and get some guns, get some gangbangers off the street. And I show that episode because it's dramatic and it also demonstrates about policing. But the reason I really show it is because it has a happy ending. Nobody gets hurt. I get to be on Cops. But they don't always end like that. Shortly after I went to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, I was having dinner. I was just coming out. It was 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. And a call came out that there was a man shooting students at a high school. And at first, it didn't sound like it was real because the report was that there was a guy dressed all in black. And he's got bandoliers of ammunition, and he's got a shoulder holster on, and he's got a sword, and he's got throwing stars, and he's shooting the kids at a high school dance on a Saturday night. And when the first broadcast came out, I'm thinking, okay, get out of here, come on. But it soon became apparent that this was the real deal because there were 2 couples on a double date, and they were following the guy and on the phone with 911 by a cell phone. And they were telling the dispatcher, okay, he's shooting at the kids again, they're diving for cover. Well, the shooter saw that these people were following him and turned around and fired at them. And the bullet went right through the windshield between the heads of the 2 couples, at which time the driver said to himself, I think I've done my civic duty, and turned around and got the hell out of Dodge. And at about that time, I'm pulling onto the street. And another patrol unit is getting there just as I'm pulling on the street, and I see this guy dressed exactly like they said. He's walking right towards them. The two cops dive out of the car. They're using their car doors for cover. They're pointing their guns at him, and I can't hear them, but I know what they're saying. Drop the gun, stop, don't move. And I'm expecting to see in the next couple of seconds that A, he's going to turn and run, or B, he's going to throw the gun down, or C, he's going to raise the gun and they're going to shoot him. But I'm expecting one of these things to happen, but he does something that nobody expects. He walks right towards them. They've got their spotlights on him, their headlights on him, and he's got the gun in his hand, and then he puts the gun in his shoulder holster and walks right by him and nods like a little, good night. And the two cops are standing there like, oh shit, what do we do now? And this is the scene that I'm in. This is taking place in seconds, of course. Now our helicopter has gotten there, so they're shining their light on this guy. And he now makes a quick left, and he's walking up a driveway of an apartment complex, and there's a whole bunch of people standing there that he's walking towards. This is better than a TV episode of Cops. They're watching all this. What's going to happen? They don't know that this guy has just shot students. I can't let him get to those people. So I use some palm trees for cover, and I'm screaming at him, drop the gun, stop, police, stop. And he's listening to me like he listened to those other two guys. And I have to make a decision. But I don't want to shoot him in the back. So I make the decision I'm going to take him physically. So I run up behind him. He hears me at the last minute, and he turns. And as he turns, I do a flying side kick into his abdomen, thinking that my mighty karate moves are going to knock him down and he's going to give up. And that's one of those things that, it's a nice theory. Didn't quite work like that. And as I kicked him, he went down like this. And when he came up, he had the pistol in his hand. And he and I were as close. Raise your hand like that. We were about just like that. And we both fired simultaneously. I was not wearing any body armor. We fired 2 shots, and my gun jammed. And now I'm going click, 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 and he's going boom, boom, boom. And I got nowhere to go. I'm in a parking lot. And I'm expecting that I'm going to feel what it's like to die. I'm expecting to feel what a bullet feels like when it enters you. But at the same time, I don't want to die. I roll onto my back, onto the ground, and I try to clear my gun so I can use it again. And he's trying to shoot me. I'm going side by side, and he's going boom, boom. And as he's firing, little pieces of asphalt are coming up, and they're hitting me in the head. And I remember thinking, is that it? Is that the one? But I was able to clear my gun and start firing from the ground back at him. Well, the helicopter, remember I told you it was up there? They see his muzzle flashes and they see me go down. And they radio, shots fired, officer down. My old partner now drives in. He hears that. He sees the suspect. He aims his police car at him because he's decided he's going to just run him over and be done with it. Nice theory. But when you're in the midst of a battle, a gun battle, a critical incident, physiological things take place like tunnel vision. So my old partner was aimed right at him, but he didn't quite see those big cement stanchions that were in the way. So he totaled his police car as he smashed into the stanchions trying to save my life. Well, he didn't achieve his goal of hitting him, but he did take the guy's attention away from me long enough for me to get back up. Now, I've now expended a full magazine. I reload and I start shooting again. And I'm thinking I'm the world's worst shot because this guy isn't moving and I'm this close to him. He takes off. Now we're in a running gun battle. He runs around the corner of a building. He hides behind a tree or bush. And that's where the gun battle ended. I was never hit. I was never scratched. And he died at the scene. Even though I was completely justified in killing that man, I can tell you this: it changes you forever. You could be completely legally, morally justified. That was one of those milestones I was talking about. 60% of police officers who use their weapons in the line of duty resign within 2 years. You can use that as an excuse, or you can use it to get better. I chose to use it to get better. I became a better cop because of that night. I understood much more about life. My career continued, and I got to be on that TV show Cops. I got to do some movies. I got to write some books, one of which I have out there. See, one of the things that affected me from that night was how I would be remembered. I lost my fear of death. But after the Trade Center attacks, there was something that I felt I needed to do. I wanted to do something to help the families of the police officers who were killed in 9/11. And at the same time, help build a bridge between the people that we serve and the people who serve. And so what I did was I wrote a story. I wrote a story about that little girl whose life I saved. And I asked cops from around the country to tell me a story, something that affected them. St. Martin's Press published that book, and I donated every single penny of the royalties to the Widows and Orphans Fund for the cops who were killed in 9/11. That also led to a writing career for me. My fourth book is about to be published, The Power of Legacy. But why is legacy so important to me? I spent the next decade going through the promotional process, becoming a leader on the agency. I was a lieutenant. My career was going very, very well. Very proud of the time that I spent there. And then a series of incidents happened, which changed forever, changed me forever. Within a period of 4 months, my mother, with whom I lived, became terminally ill. After my dad died, I brought her out to Vegas to live with me. And living with your mom when you're 50 is a whole lot different than living with your mom when you're 15. But I was blessed to have that time. I was blessed to have that time to be a friend with my mom and come to understand life in a different way. Well, she became terminally ill, and I took leave from the department, family leave, to stay with her, and got her into home hospice. If any of you have ever experienced that, those people are angels. And she stabilized after a couple of months. She stabilized long enough that they were not sure when her death was going to happen, so I went back to work. And I was back to work 3 weeks. As the watch commander, I responded to a hostage incident. And there was a man that was holding, he had tried to kill his wife and baby. And now he was standing outside of his house with 2 guns to his head. And he was surrounded by my officers, and I was the incident commander. And as I pulled up to the scene, I found out that the wife and baby were still in the house. So I ordered a team to go around to get them out, but before they could do that, he tried to get back in to get them. And I had to order the shooting of another man and was involved in the shooting myself. A repeat, no matter how justified. Shortly thereafter, my mother passed away. And my mother was an exceptional woman, and she was a medal winner in World War II, one of the few women that won the Bronze Star. And so she was able to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So I did that. She's buried next to my dad. When I returned, the world was a little bit different. And 3 weeks later, I was back on patrol as the watch commander. And when I was the watch commander, I would take a young patrol officer with me so that they could see that their lieutenant actually did some police work every now and then. And I had this young man with me. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. We're right in front of Bally's Hotel, right on the strip, and I had a stroke in my police car. And of all the frightening things that have happened to me in my career, this one took the cake. I actually felt my brain slowing down. And I knew exactly what was happening. And I stopped the police car in the middle of the street, and I said to this poor young patrolman, I said, hey, you got to get me medical, I'm having a stroke. And he's looking at me like, okay, I know the lieutenant's a little crazy. But it became apparent that I really wasn't joking. And I got out of the car, went around to get into the passenger seat so he could get me to the hospital if we couldn't wait for the ambulance, and lost the ability to speak, lost the ability to move, and went down onto the pavement. And I was unable to speak or move. It was the most frightening moment of my life. And while I'm down there, he's calling for help. Cops get there to surround me and wait for the ambulance. And my last on-duty memory as a police officer is this. There were tourists walking by taking pictures with their cell phones of me being laid out on the pavement. And my last memory was a patrol officer saying, if you don't get that camera out of his face, I'm going to take it off you and stick it up your ass. And I remember thinking, that's the Metro I know and love. Subsequent to that, that was my last day as an active duty police officer. Shortly thereafter, the doctors did their thing and did some surgery on me, pronounced that I had a severe heart ailment. And after the surgery, the doctor sat on my bed and he said, Randy, how do you feel? And I said, tell you the truth, I feel pretty good. And he says, I'm happy that that's the case, but I don't want you to be under the mistaken impression that anything we did here is going to preclude you from walking out of here and having a major heart attack or stroke. And I got to tell you, that's not what I expected to hear. And I said, well, why did you do it then? He says, because it'll make you feel better. I said, okay. Well, while that was taking place, that medical diagnosis, all of those things, the death of my mother, the end of my career, I thought that this stroke was the worst thing that could have happened to me. I lost my job. I lost the ability that I thought to help people. But I gained something. I gained something really important. And I call it the gift of clarity. Because you see, I realized from my experience laying on that pavement and having the great fortune to recover from that as long as I am here, I can still change the world. I can still make a difference. I can still serve, just in a different way. Well, from that, two things were born. The new company that is about to be launched called Celebrating Legacy, which I believe is going to change the lives of millions of people. With Celebrating Legacy, we've been working on for 3.5 years. The technology is almost complete. In fact, when I come back from this trip, we begin testing this website. This web service allows people to create their personal legacies in written, audio, or digital form. I was so concerned with how I would be remembered. How could I make sure that my parents' memories would live on? That we created this. And this service will allow people to share memories, to archive them, so that your great-grandchildren will know who you were from your own words. The stories of your family's history, and at the same time, memorialize loved ones who've passed away, and leave the wisdom that you want to the people that you love. We've created an entire new social network called the Family Journal, which you invite only your true friends and family to share those memories. They get permanently archived so that when your children are grown, they can look at that and share those memories amongst themselves and pass those memories on in the future. So none of that would have happened had I not experienced that stroke and then that subsequent diagnosis. And so none of us really know how much longer we have. I believe that I was given that gift of clarity to make this one last contribution. And I believe it's going to do just that. So I think that I have taken up enough of your time with my stories, but I'd love to take some questions if you have some about either my policing career, the movies. I do have a couple stories about that. Or about anything that I just spoke about.
I got a question.
Yes.
How is that different? If you could repeat the question for the camera too. How is your thing different than what Spielberg has done in the Jewish community to archive all the people that was in the Holocaust and so forth? But you said the technology wasn't there or whatever, you just developed it. I mean, isn't that the same thing that he's done?
What he has done is, in essence, he's allowing people to tell their stories and archive them for the future. So yes, that's one of the services. Here's a couple. I didn't get into it. That when I was going through this, whoever has dealt with the loss of someone close to them, I'm sure there's lots of you that have. It fell to me when my father died and my mother died to pick up their address book and start making phone calls to their friends and saying, my mother's dead. And every time you do that, it's like stabbing yourself in the heart. Same thing with writing an obituary when you're in that grieving process. And I wanted to take that onus away from my family. So one of the things that we have created in this technology is I am now in charge of who gets notified about when I die. And I can leave a personal message for those people. You know, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of things I should have said to the people in my life that I never did. And I knew that it would make me feel better and prepare me better to know that those things were said. So that's part of the technology that we've created. I now write my own obituary. And not only does it get posted to the newspapers where I want it to be, but it gets permanently archived. So that when I put a memorial up for my parents, it doesn't go away in 3 months. It stays there forever, and it becomes part of a searchable database. We've trademarked something called the Legopedia, which is the Wikipedia for the common person. This is a free service that you can go on and put your own biography. We've created the Family Journal. So there's a lot more to it than just that. I didn't want to talk about every and there's more to it. But it's a very, very, I believe that this will become the most important website for many people because it is, everyone's got memories. There's nothing more precious. We've got a shoebox in our closet that's got those photographs, those letters. This way I can put my mother's poetry, my father's artwork, and it'll be there forever. So that's why I believe that what we have created is going to touch the lives of millions. Who else? Yes, sir.
How'd you end up acting?
When I was a kid, I did musical theater, and I loved it, but I never intended to do anything with it. What happened was, from being on the television show Cops, I get a phone call from a casting agent saying, you don't know me, but I work for this casting agency, and there's going to be a movie filmed in Las Vegas. And the director wants realism as a police officer. Would you come down and do an audition? I said, sure. So I go to the hotel, and I walk in the room. It's similar to this, about this size. And who's standing there but Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese? And my audition consisted of me telling them stories about my police career. We call them war stories. And some of them are kind of funny, and some of them are kind of sad. And after about 45 minutes of war stories, they said, you've got the part. So that's how I got the part in Casino, which was a pretty substantial speaking role with scene with Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone. And then from that I got into the Screen Actors Guild, and then just got some of those other roles. And we're actually going to begin filming, I think about 3 months. It's a new movie called The Wish Man, and this is a movie you got to see. It's about the man who created the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Frank Shankwitz. I met him through doing this book, The Power of Legacy. I told you I went around the country talking to amazing people. When I reached out to Frank Shankwitz, I had seen him on a news show talking about how he created the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And I don't know if you know this, but Frank Shankwitz, you probably don't know his name because he kept a really low profile, but he was an Arizona Highway Patrol officer when he created it. And what had happened was he was dispatched to help. There was a mother that called the Highway Patrol and said, look, my son, Chris, is 7 years old and he's dying of cancer. But he loves that television show, Chips. And I'd love for him to be able to meet a real motorcycle policeman. So they sent Frank and his partner to meet him. And they made this little boy an honorary trooper. They had a nice little ceremony for him. And Frank met him, and he put him on the motorcycle, and he just fell in love with this little boy. And Frank said to the Highway Patrol, look, you just made him an honorary trooper, but he doesn't have a uniform. Can we get him a uniform? And they said, well, sure. So Frank calls the uniform shop, and it's the end of the day, but he says, look, can you make this little uniform? He's 4 foot this. And so they stayed all night, and they made the uniform for this little boy. And Frank and his partner picked it up and brought it over to him. And it was the proudest thing he ever did when he put on that little uniform. He put on his little galoshes with it. And the little boy was so thrilled, and he said, but I want to be a motorcycle policeman like you. And he pointed to the winged wheel. I don't know if you know this, but every motorcycle police officer in the United States, what designates that different is he has a motorcycle wheel with a wing on it. The winged wheel, it's called. And he pointed to this winged wheel. He says, can I get one of those? And Frank said, absolutely. So they called up the jeweler that makes them, and they said, look, here's what's happening. And the jeweler spent all night making this winged wheel for this little boy. And they were going to deliver it to him the next day, and Frank picked it up, and they got a phone call to call the station right away. And they told him that the little boy had slipped into a coma. And Frank and his partner went to the little boy's, to his bedside, and he's in a coma, and he's got his Highway Patrol uniform hanging up right next to him, and his mother is there, you know. And Frank wanted to make sure that he had his winged wheel. So they put it on the collar, and the little boy woke up. And he started laughing and giggling, and he says, am I a motorcycle cop? I said, yes, you are. And he said, I'm really tired. And he died. Well, from that incident, Frank created the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He took that trauma, he took that pain, and he built something which has touched the lives of millions of people, not only in our country, but throughout the world. That's the power of legacy. And that's what this book is full of, stories like that. And we're about to film the story of his life called The Wish Man. Any other questions that I can, I'm sorry I didn't make anybody cry. Yes, sir.
When you reflect on your legacy, did you change anything?
Yeah. There are things I would have changed. I look back on some of the decisions that I made. I think I would have been kinder earlier. I think that I would have enjoyed the moments that I believed were common, but really were not with my family and my friends. I would have changed those. I would have changed some of those things. I wouldn't have changed the course of my life, though. And thank you for that. Who else? I think I saw another hand up here.
Really, how much is it going to cost once your website is up for people to put all that stuff up? Is there going to be a fee?
Yeah, it's going to be $49 the first year, $10 thereafter. We're making it exceedingly. In fact, you know what? I have the card, my business card in the back. If you see me on the way out, it's got my email address. I would like to do this, that every single person in this room, I will give you a free membership that will, I'd like you to enjoy this when we do launch. Just email me so that I can put in, so I can, once the testing process is done, that I can give it to you guys. I'd love for you to have it. I think that I think it'll be something that will bring you great joy and great comfort.
Any other questions? Tremendous job.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.